Today we're going to be talking about angiosperms, and angiosperms are our flowering plants. The flower is going to be the reproductive organ, and it's going to ultimately make seeds which are surrounded by a fruit. So let's go ahead and start talking about the angiosperm life cycle. And the angiosperm life cycle starts with the sporophyte stage. The sporophyte is going to be the dominant stage. The stage that if you were to go out in the environment and look at a plant, it would be the most obvious stage. That's the stage you would notice if you looked at a flowering plant. So let's go ahead and start talking about the sporophyte. So I'm going to write sporophyte on top. And the sporophyte is going to be 2N. And that is our dominant stage. So I'm going to make a little note here that that is the dominant stage. And because all plants, including the angiosperms, go through an alternation of generations, we not only have the sporophyte stage, but we're going to have the gametophyte stage. And we have two different gametophytes. We're going to have the female gametophyte and the male gametophyte. So let's go ahead and write those down. So I'm going to write female gametophyte. And it's going to be haploid. And another name for the female gametophyte is the embryo sac. And we'll talk more about the embryo sac in a later video. But for now, the embryo sac is going to contain 7 cells. And we really need to know 2 of those 7 cells. One of the cells is going to be an egg, and the other very important cell is going to be the central cell. Now, the male gametophyte is also haploid, and it also goes by another name called the pollen grain. And a pollen grain is essentially a hollow protein container. And inside that hollow protein container are ultimately going to be 2 cells that are going to become non-flagellated sperm. And we don't need the flagella because these sperm do not have to swim through water to get to the egg. They're actually going to ride inside the pollen grain in order to get to the egg through a process called pollination. Now the sporophyte is going to produce spores. And we're going to produce 2 different types of spores, 2 phenotypically different spores. One is going to be very large. It's going to be referred to as a megaspore. Mega means large. And the other one's going to be very small. It's referred to as a microspore. Micro means small. And the gametophytes are going to produce gametes, sperm and egg. So let's go ahead and write those over here. These are our gametes. Our gametes are haploid, sperm and egg. Now let's connect up the various parts of our life cycle. So the sporophyte is going to produce a megaspore, and it's also going to produce a microspore. And because these spores are 2 different sizes, they phenotypically look different from each other, we're going to call that heterospory. And hetero means different because we produce 2 different size spores. In addition to these spores being different sizes, they're going to be genetically different also. Now, we're going from 2N to N, and the way you do that is through the process of meiosis. Again, meiosis is sexual reproduction. It's going to produce genetically different cells, and that's going to increase variation because we want that. We want to produce genetically different cells because that's going to increase variation, and variation is going to help us. It's going to help the species change over time as the environment changes. Now these spores are going to be created on the flower, the reproductive structure. And the flower is going to contain the ovary, that is the female reproductive structure, and the male reproductive structure is going to be called the anther. And inside the anther, that's where the microspores are going to form, and that's also where the pollen is going to form. So our megaspore over time is going to further develop into the female gametophyte, and the microspore is going to further develop into the male gametophyte. And we're going from end to end, so this is going to occur through the process of mitosis. And we want to keep in mind that these spores are going to stay put. Unlike mosses and ferns that release their spores into the air, these spores are going to stay put. They're going to stay put in the anther or in the ovary. So let's make a note of that. Spores remain in ovary and anther. Now we're at the gametophyte stage, and the gametophytes are going to produce the gametes. So the female gametophyte is going to produce an egg, which is haploid, and the male gametophyte is going to produce two non-flagellated sperm, both of which are going to be haploid. And this pollen grain is going to make its way to the female egg of another plant through the process of pollination. And oftentimes in angiosperms, this pollination can occur through the wind, or even more so, it can occur with the use of an animal, like an insect, bees for example, or birds or bats. They are the major pollinators on Earth. So insects, bees, and bats play a very, very, very important role in pollination. We're going from N to N, so this is going to occur through the process of mitosis. Now, the sperm and the egg are going to get together through the process of pollination. So I'm going to write sperm and egg, and when fertilization takes place, we're going to have an embryo be produced. So the sperm is going to be N, the egg is going to be N, and the embryo is going to be 2N. Now over here, our other sperm is also going to be involved in fertilization, but it's going to fertilize a central cell. So I'm going to go ahead and write sperm plus a central cell. I'm going to give us endosperm. And the endosperm is going to be the food for the developing embryo. So the embryo is going to consume the endosperm, this food, when the seed germinates and it begins to grow. Now the sperm is going to be N. Central cell is going to be central cell is actually going to be 2N. Okay, the central cell is going to be 2N. It has two nuclei called polar nuclei, and N plus 2N is going to give us 3N. So the endosperm is going to be triploid. It's going to be 3N. Now both this event where two sperm fertilize two different structures is going to be called double fertilization. Double fertilization. Both sperm have a role to play here. And both the embryo and the endosperm are going to be part of a seed. So that's ultimately what's going to be produced upon fertilization. We're going to begin the process of seed development. And the seed, once it's mature, is going to be released, either by the wind or oftentimes the angiosperms recruit animals to deliver their seeds to new locations. So let's go ahead and connect up the seed with the sporophyte. So once the seed lands in a favorable place, it's going to begin to germinate or grow, and that baby embryo is going to grow into an adult sporophyte, and it's going to continue this whole cycle again and again and again. And that's it. for angiosperm development, angiosperm life cycle.